The Denver Nuggets are cooked. I think we all need to realize that. A first-round exit to a shorthanded Timberwolves team that not only was missing their best player in Anthony Edwards, but then key role players in Ayo Dosunmu and Dante DiVincenzo, and they got cooked by Terrence Shannon Jr. Jamal Murray gets absolutely locked up, and Jaden McDaniels backs up the trash. So the question that we're asking today is it time for the Denver Nuggets to make a serious change to the roster? Could they blow it up realistically this summer and reconstruct that roster as a whole? Jamal Murray had a solid season. He can gain something back in the trades. We're going to talk about it all and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. Y'all, we got to start off with what happened in Game 6. The Denver Nuggets didn't just lose a game. They lost in a way that I think it forces you to ask some tough questions in regards to what is the next step for this team. This is a team that since winning the title has just never been the same. And it's not that they haven't tried. Adding Cam Johnson, of course, they lost the role players after that. They brought some of those guys back. They restocked the role players in the bench this year. Had a breakout from Peyton Watson, who didn't play in the series, right? You had Aaron Gordon missing the last two games of the series. So now when you look at that loss, 110-98 in Game 6 to an underhanded, short-staffed, and outwardly just a team in the Minnesota Timberwolves that just should not have beaten them. And so you look at it's going to have to be asked some tough questions. Now, they already changed the coach. They've changed the front office. So does that lead them to changing the roster? But let's focus on the game first, right? Terrence Shannon Jr., who it took 20 shots to get 23 points, right? Him and Jaden McDaniels carved up the Denver Nuggets along with Naz Reid coming off the bench in that team. Julius Randle had 18 in that game as well. And the Denver Nuggets in a closeout game shot the ball 37% from three, 45% from the field overall. The Minnesota Timberwolves, for what it's worth, only shot 24% from three themselves, but they got out-rebounded to the Denver Nuggets 33-50. They got out-rebounded by almost 20 rebounds when it came down to it. They had 13 turnovers in that game. Like, when you look at the way that the Denver Nuggets lost this game, there's no way you can expect you can come out of this and not ask some serious questions about the direction and where your team's going. This loss feels bigger than just a bad matchup. It feels like a referendum on what needs to happen with this team and the roster overall, right? Like, the question that you have to ask, and I want to hear from you guys, like, maybe you guys think I'm tripping on this one. Was this just a bad series, or did Minnesota expose something really flawed about this Denver Nuggets current roster in the build that they came into? Now, keep in mind, the Denver Nuggets already had some tough questions that they needed to ask in the season. They don't like paying the repeater tax, right? And so because of that, just to keep Peyton Watson, they're already going to have to trade, Cam Johnson or a combination of the two, to try to get enough space to even keep Peyton Watson, who had a breakout season for him. They would have to do that. The Denver Nuggets head into the season with no changes to the roster, already $10 million above the first tax apron and only $2.5 million beneath the second tax apron. So while they do have bird rights and they could very well keep Peyton Watson, re-sign everybody, and go into that second tax apron, are they going to want to do that for a team that just disappointed in a first-round exit against an understaffed Minnesota Timberwolves team? And when you look at who has to take up the heat, right now, for what it's worth, Jokic after the game talked about the team and needing changes and the fact that, that the team just doesn't have what it needs, right? It doesn't have that necessary edge. He says this: I still want to be a Nugget forever. We just lost in the first round. I think we are far away, right? And he did say this. He said when he asked about how much of the blame that he accepts, he says a lot. I needed to play better. I must play better. And that's great, right? Like, Jokic at the beginning of the series struggled. And I would say this may have been the absolute worst playoff series that we've ever seen from Nikola Jokic. And maybe you guys feel like that's a bit of a hyperbole, but that's my honest thoughts on that. But Jamal Murray was not far behind him. Only 12 points in a closeout game, going 4-17 from the field, and Jamal Murray got absolutely locked up by Jaden McDaniels. I'm talking about, like, we saw an assault out there is what happened when you look at Jamal Murray. And in the course of the series, he did average 23 points per game in the series, but he shot 35% in the totality of the series, he only had one game where he shot above 40% and another game where he shot 40%, but everything else was below that for Jamal Murray. He shot 26% from three in this series. That's not going to cut it. And so when you're looking at people to blame, of course, Jamal Murray is going to garner a large part of the blame in regards to that. Him and Jokic absolutely should share that because they both had very tough series when it came down to it. When you are able to put Jaden McDaniels on Jamal Murray and it completely takes him out of this, it is what it is, right? And so when you look at the Denver Nuggets offense, it relies so heavily on the dynamic and the two-man game between Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. And so when Jamal Murray disappears, the Nuggets don't have enough creation. They don't have enough spacing. They don't have enough anything to survive in a series. Now, did I think they'd be able to still make it past a Minnesota Timberwolves team that was missing Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo, and Ayo Dosunmu in a closeout game? Maybe, right? But I think overall, like, you got to ask, can you trust Jamal Murray as Nikola Jokic's two anymore? Is that something that you can do right now? Even if you don't, we'll talk about the team possibly moving on from Jamal Murray here in a second. But like, even if you don't do that, I think that you may have to look at this and say you may need a more flexible number two option next to Nikola Jokic if you want to make it work, right? And so when you had a player like Jaden McDaniels who was talking so much shit before this game, he called out Denver's defense and he came out and backed it up. Finished the game with 32 points, 10 rebounds in regards down to it. He mocked Jamal Murray in regards to that. And when you talk about a matchup that flips emotionally, right? And that is a thing that happens in the series, emotions, momentum, whatever you want to call it. Minnesota punked the fuck out of Denver in this series. Let's just be frank about it. Let's just call a thing a thing. They got completely punked in this series. And Jaden McDaniels and his words and backing it up in game 6, it's a huge point to that one. Minnesota didn't just win the physical matchup in this game. They won the mental war and then going on to win this series, right? And so then when you get the comments from Nikola Jokic saying that Denver is far away, right? And that, when it came down, says he still wants to be a Nugget, but this team is far away. And while he did accept the blame and even defended David Adelman, who, could very well be on his way out, Denver now has to prove that it can rebuild a contender fast. Because, listen, say what you will about Jokic, who still is playing at an absolute MVP level. Jokic is still yoked, don't make no mistake about it. But this also wasn't the strongest series from Nikola Jokic, despite what the numbers will tell you, which the numbers were decent enough, 25 points, 13 rebounds, 9.5 assists, but he shot 44% from the field, 19% from three-point range. He fell in love with the three way too much early in this series as well. So I love to hear that Jokic is taking blame as the best player and a former MVP. You need to do that. But at the end of the day, like, you now have this, right? And I think when you look at this, while Jokic is extremely loyal to the Denver Nuggets, loyalty does not mean that you're going to have patience forever when you see the things that's happening like this. Like, already after winning a title, you let most of the depth go. You spend a couple of years just to get that depth back. Not to say that the Denver Nuggets were a terrible team over that time period, but like to really be a championship contender, they never got there again. So the question now that you have to come down to it is, what changes are being made to this roster? Who survives what's coming this offseason? Like I said, even if you wanted to just bring re-sign Peyton Watson and bring everything back, you're running right into the second tax apron. So you're looking at an offseason that regardless, even if you don't want to move on from Jamal Murray, one of Cam Johnson, Christian Braun, Christian Braun, who didn't have the strongest series ever, but, Cam Johnson had a really strong game 6. Take that for what you will. Like, it was good to see that from him. But you have to ask some tough questions about what are you going to do in this roster, and that's just to keep Peyton Watson, much less build this thing back up to have a true championship contender. So here's the thing, that I do think that we are in store for a big offseason of changes for the Denver Nuggets. I think that is coming. What those changes are going to be, I think that it can get as much as you look at Jamal Murray. If you're able to move off of him and not take the equal salary back at $50 million, Jamal Murray is about to make $50 million. And this is a guy that had a really strong season this year, 25.5 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 7.1 assists, shot the ball 48% from the field as a guard and 43% from three, which is really good to see that, right? So you have a Jamal Murray now that, even at being 29 years old, is probably going to have decent trade value. You look at teams like the Houston Rockets would absolutely love to bite on that. You can try to work it in as part of a bigger trade with Giannis, or not saying Giannis comes to Denver, but you could work something in regards to that. Like, there's a number of things that you can do with it. And, the cap flexibility that you gain just by removing Jamal Murray is huge. But, I mean, you're going to have to match something. But that salary does limit what you can do. the injury history of Jamal Murray is another thing that you have to look at when it came down to. He played 75 games this season, which is great. That is the most games that he has played since 2018 and 19, right? So all these things could shape up to where you have a better, a better value for him. And I think when you look at it too, the inconsistent playoff production from Jamal Murray, it does matter. So if you move Jamal Murray, you can bring back multiple rotation players and a different type of on-ball creator that may be able to help some of the limitations that got exposed by the Denver Nuggets in this series, right? Now, of course, there's arguments against trading Jamal Murray. Murray and Jokic, the chemistry that they have there is the backbone of what your team's built on. So if you were to move him, you're removing part of that backbone of your team. They already won the championship together. Murray has been with that franchise, his whole entire career. He has a proven playoff resume when it comes down to it. And the two-man game between Jokic and Jamal Murray is legitimate. We've seen it. You can build a championship contender off of that. But the thing that you have to ask yourself is, how limiting is it? I feel like every team has a runway, right? And whether that runway runs out because of money and it just limits your flexibility to maneuver, right? Or it runs out because it just isn't as potent as what it is. I think you could be running into both those things with the Denver Nuggets. Now, I could be overreacting to one series, right? We can see you can run the series back, play the same games, and maybe it goes the Denver Nuggets' way. And maybe the Denver Nuggets are going to look at that, say, hey, let's find a destination for Cam Johnson with him, playing solidly in Game 6. We're going to keep Peyton Watson. We're going to run it back. We're going to add some, strategic pieces with exceptions and other things that we have. And we're going to look at it and think that we're going to be good because Jokic still played at an MVP level. That could very well happen. But you have to ask yourself the risk that you run into if you do that. Because if you do that and you get wrong another year, that means that's another year that could be possibly wasted. That's another year that you could have reset the roster around Jokic with a different type of makeup. And that's just the reality of it. But I also think you can't look up Adelman being potentially released as well. I know Jokic gave him the vote of confidence when it came down to that. It's great to hear from Jokic, but Jokic also gave the vote of confidence for Mike Malone. And now that Mike Malone has signed a contract with UNC, right? Now that leaves it possibly open to, they don't have to pay Mike Malone anymore. For those that don't know, when you fire a coach in the NBA, you still got to pay out their contract until they either sign another head coaching deal somewhere else or the length of that contract originally runs out. In a case like this, because Mike Malone now they are getting that relief from that, they could fire David Adelman and then try to find another coach and maybe hope that a mix of coaches on top of some other mix with rosters could end up getting you there. But I would not be surprised. When you look at this roster, there's maybe a tough decision that has to be answered between Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon. And I think that when you look at, that's $80 million between the two of those guys, 31 going to Aaron Gordon next year, 50 going to Jamal Murray. Now, Aaron Gordon is turning 31 years old, not old in life, but in basketball. Once you get over 30, you never know what's going to happen. Cam Johnson is also 30 years old. So you are looking at that aspect of things. But I do think two of those three guys could be gone. When you look at Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Cam Johnson, or even throw in Peyton Watson, if they do sign and trade Peyton Watson somewhere else to get something back instead of losing him for nothing, that's a possibility as well. Or they just could get outbid in that. So there's a lot going on. Denver is cooked. And they're cooked in a way to where, because they still have Jokic, you can get yourself out of it. You can get yourself out of it and find a new mix-up with players, but it's going to take diligently moving this offseason. It's going to take being very intentional about what you do with your assets this offseason as you move forward into that. Now, for what it's worth as well, the Denver Nuggets have their own first-round pick. Now, that's not tradable until you're in the draft. They can trade that pick during the NBA draft. That's when they can trade it, right? And then their picks for the next, 4 years are all protected potentially to OKC. So you have that part of it. They can't trade any of those picks when it comes down to that one. So, if they do want to start moving things, they don't have a lot of draft allocation to move on things. Of course, they can add the protection that if it doesn't convey to OKC, then the other team gets it. But that's not a guaranteed thing to happen there, especially if you are changing the mix-up of your roster so much to where you're moving one of your key pieces. But I want to hear from you guys in this one. The Denver Nuggets, what they have to find answers to some tough questions this offseason. Do you think that could lead them to trading one of, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Cam Johnson, Peyton Watson? Do you think one of those guys can end up not being in a Denver Nuggets jersey next year? And then which one do you think they should move? Who do you think they should target if they do decide to change the mix-up of their roster as well? Let me know what you guys think of all of that down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of NBA Central. We'll just say this, man. This offseason always brings some questions that you don't expect, especially with how a playoff series ends. And so now the Denver Nuggets are one of those teams asking themselves some questions they may have not assumed that they were going to have to ask themselves at the end of this season. So we'll see. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at NBA Central Pod. Send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
Been a presentation of the Breaks Media.